information. There's new information. We got the Gospel of Thomas and we got these other things. Here's some new information. Let's look at this. And the person says, you know what? The God that I have isn't really right for me anymore. I've kind of outgrown that. It's time for me to move along. It's time for me to mature. And they replace the God that they had with another one. This God of more synchronistic kind of approach where I take all kinds of stuff from all sorts of different religions, mash them together, and then I come up with this replacement God. It happens all the time, but I want to say that there's one place where it catches you and I off guard. And we have already done two things today in our service to potentially lead you to replace God. And that is that we live in a society that has every flavor Christianity. We have multiple Bible translations. We have multiple worship styles. We have multiple churches. There's not just Lafayette Community Church. You're pretty aware there are other churches in this town. There's Faith Baptist. There's Covenant Church over in West Lafayette. There's Northview Christian Life Church. There's Clear River Church. There's ECC. There's all kinds of acronyms and initials and all sorts of different churches in this town. We're another one. And so if you don't like God here, you can go find God somewhere else, and you can keep looking for God at different churches until you find one that fits. And this is a good thing, actually, because there's a world of people out there who would never go to church unless there was something that connected with them, unless they did the kind of music that we do and read the kind of translation of the Bible that we read. And so that's true. Sometimes we need to have multiple flavors so that we can touch as many people as possible. But here's the deal. It's too easy for us to get addicted to the stuff and to ignore the God inside. It's too easy for us to get addicted to the style of music or the translation of the Bible. I'm reading one translation of the Bible and I don't like the way it does that particular verse, so I'm going to move on to another one. And in a sense, there's a part of my brain that has just replaced God. That has said, okay, I'm going to substitute this new ideas of God for that one. And this is a dangerous place. I'm not saying that any of you are directly guilty of it, but it is something we need to constantly watch. It's far too easy for us to latch on to the traditions and the stuff about God rather than God as He is. So that's the first command there. But as you move on, the next thing, He says, you shall have no other gods before me. Now, I had to look this up because in English, when we say the word before, quite often what we mean is the one that comes before me in terms of time, or the one that comes before me in terms of position in a line, or the one that comes before me in terms of significance, so that a person might be before me because they're more important than me, or they might be before me because they showed up here earlier, or they might be before me because they're standing in line in front of me, one of those things. Well, the phrase in the original language, both in Greek and in Hebrew, for this before me, actually says literally this: before my face. God says, you shall have no other gods before my face. In other words, what God is saying, don't bring any other gods into my presence. They don't belong in my house. They don't belong here. I don't want to see them. You should not have them. I can see everything that you're doing. I can see everything that you're up to, and I don't want to see those things. So in other words, what God is saying is, I'm here. Don't add any more to me. This is the way I would phrase it. The temptation goes like this. We're tempted to augment God. And this is one that is far more easy for me to explain and recognize to you. If you go into the polytheistic religions of old, you've got the God of the sun, the God of the moon, the God of fertility, the God of the earth, the God of the rain. You have all these different gods, and that's because the God of the sun is not good enough. If you want to have rain on your crops, you can't have just a God over the sun. You need to have a God who controls the rain too. And so it makes the most sense that the God of the sun is generally a hot and fiery sort of dude, and so you need a completely different sort of God to have a God over the rain. And so you would add this next one. And then that's not enough because, you want your crops to grow and be fruitful. So you need to have a fertility God, and that fertility God can also deal with the things of humanity and help us have better babies too. So you need a third God there. And then some people die, and so you have to have a God over death, and you just keep adding them on down this line and down that line until you have this whole polytheistic group of gods that you say, okay, now I think I've got all my bases covered. And then something new comes up, and now you need to have a God over Hondas because the God over Toyotas doesn't like them as much, and they're at war with each other. So that's how it just multiplies. But we do the same thing with God ourselves. Even though we wouldn't call ourselves polytheistic, we do the same thing because what we're doing is we're saying God is not enough for me. I need something else. Let me try to put this into earthly perspective for you. When you get in a car wreck and your body is healthy, but you get out of the car and you look and your car is mashed, and you go and you talk to the other person, what do you say to that person? Assuming you're not completely angry at them. Assuming that this is a relatively emotionally stable situation, you go up to them and you ask for two pieces of information, don't you? You ask for their driver's license and you ask for their insurance, right? Because you need to know how to get in touch with them, and you need to know how the power to repair your car is going to be dealt with, right? What are the things, if I were to say, what are the things that you rely upon, especially in a disaster? Or what are the things you rely upon daily and weekly and in your average, everyday, ordinary life? I could probably mention a few of them. One is money. We rely on our money constantly. One is power. You rely on your personal power and the influence you have over other people for a lot of things. One is insurance. For your retirement or your car or your house, you've got insurance. And probably, if you're a believer, you've got God somewhere. You rely on God because, He's got to be in the mix there helping you out too, right? So if you just had those four things and you had to get rid of three of them, which would be the first to go? This is the question that I think we can ask ourselves and have the super spiritual Sunday kind of answer of, I would keep God to the very end. But in pragmatic terms, if I had to choose where I'm going to put $600 every year, am I going to put it into my church's offering plate or into my medical insurance plan? If I only had $600, where would I put that? Now, that kind of brings it home for us. Now, I'm not saying that one of those is necessarily right for you, and that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm trying to get at is the stuff in our hearts that leads us to that kind of dilemma. Okay? That's called aggregating God. It's the God and blank syndrome. Write that down somewhere there. Just write God and blank. Many of us have a blank. What is it that you put down in that blank? I'll go one more on this augmented thing. There's some arms of Christianity that augment God by adding groups of saints that we need to pray to or revere.